Welcome, Detours family, to our latest episode. As always, I'm here with my gorgeous wife, Deb.
Hi, guys.
And we are here today talking about a subject that we all struggle with all the time, denial. I think you're denying denial right now.
No, I don't think we all struggle all the time, but I do think everyone hits stages of denial, and it's easy to get seduced by denial.
It is. It's often the easy way out.
Yes.
So
yes,
it's an interesting topic.
Like you said, most people don't know they're in denial.
Of course.
I'm not in denial.
Of course.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be sad when it's happening to a friend and they're not taking advice. It can be extremely detrimental to yourself, to the people around you. Lots of bad things can happen where the root cause is denial. So I think the very first thing we should probably do is just kind of discuss what denial is.
Yes.
Before we even dive into any of it. So what, if you had to define denial, what do you think you would say? Not the Webster's Dictionary, the Deb Marcellisi definition.
The Deb version. It's a seducing, like, defense mechanism, because you don't want to have to feel pain. Nobody wants to feel pain. We're just wired that way, right? And it helps us to reduce the amount of pain we probably know is going to happen in the back of our brain. So instead of coping, we deny that it's even happening. Therefore, we don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's the easy way out.
Yeah, you said that again.
So but yeah, that's how denial. It means I don't have to change.
Yes.
Right. I look at something. I deny something. It really is a barrier between you and change. Mm-hmm. I don't need to change because there's nothing there.
There's nothing wrong.
Right.
Why would I want to change something? There's nothing wrong.
Yeah. So I see denial as just a tremendous barrier
to growth.
Yeah.
And to your relationship with Jesus.
And those around you. I mean, it with any relationship, denial can just crumble any relationship that you have, but definitely with Jesus, with your friends, with your spouse, whatever it may be. With
yourself, because typically when you're in denial, you're in some sort of self-destructive pattern.
I always like to think the best of myself,
yeah, that's good.
It's your fault the dishes didn't get done last night, not mine. No.
Yeah, that's convenient.
Yeah, but seriously, it can be. What I'd love to is you've had such a past history with your previous marriage's addiction, just how strongly rooted those men were in denial, and just what did that look like?
It looked like people that were just simply in love with dopamine. And I think that's what it boils down to with any addiction, is you get this immediate fixation of pleasure. And depending on the addict, like I think both addicts that I married were trying to escape the reality of A, who they were, and the things that they didn't like about themselves, and B, well, the first husband definitely was avoiding trauma and dealing with his sordid history. And the second one was more like just kind of hitting that phase of like, well, this feels good though. Why wouldn't I want to do this?
So
I've earned this. I work hard. I'm a good guy. I've earned this. Like, it's the rationalization part of denial.
Did you think at the time that they were in denial? Were you naive? What?
I was naive to both of them originally. Yes. I don't even need to break that down. Yes. My first, the first addict, I was a 17-year-old. So I don't know that I had a lot of skill set to have discernment or have any sort of like idea of what addiction looks like. I had my own traumas by the time I was 17. And I also participated in the partaking of drugs and alcohol because that's what we did. And I was in my own denial at that point with, you know, everything that I had been through. So it's hard to spot denial when you're in denial.
Sure.
And the second husband, well, I should say the second addict, because Phil was not my husband, Anthony's dad. I would say that I was super naive because he was in recovery for 15 years prior to me getting together with him. And I was like, wow, like he was sober 15 years. And then he said something very convincing to me, which was, you know, like, I really don't think I was an addict. I think back in those days, and that those days were like the late 80s, everybody was claiming to be an addict, and they were popping up all these, like, you know, treatment centers. It was good money to put a kid in a treatment center. And, you know, I was just like any other kid. I was just smoking pot and drinking a few beers. Like,
sure.
And that sounded
minimizing it.
Yes, minimizing is another set of denial.
Yes.
And it sounded so rational to me because
making the opposite of making mountains or making molehills into mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it'd go the other way. Take a mountain and shrink it down,
Yes.
minimalize it.
So you have rationalization, you have minimizing, and he minimized it, and it sounded pretty straightforward to me because I partied as a teenager. I drank beer
sense.
and I smoked pot. Like it didn't hit me. And yeah, that was a rude awakening when he was like, well, I just, you know, I don't really think I was an addict, so I'm just going to smoke a little pot.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I don't have the dramatic stories of past husbands and this, that, and the other, but I definitely had relationships where I was in denial as well. Ones where I was in denial about her, and then ones where I was in denial about myself. It's interesting how the symptoms are similar, but yet they're so drastically different. In one relationship, it was the denial of who she was. I thought she was a good person, and, you know, I was justifying being in the relationship, which all men and women do that, right? We've all had those relationships where our friends are sitting there going, are you serious? Like, red flashing lights, get out now.
Why don't you see these flags?
Yeah, you definitely can see that. And, you know, I was in especially one where that was the case. It was almost like I started avoiding friends because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. And that was part of my form of denial.
Oh gosh, I've been on the receiving end of being, you know, avoided.
Yes.
I have.
Yes, I did it well. And sadly, it went on for years. And then, you know, in another relationship, I was in denial of myself, that I wasn't, it just wasn't.
You weren't self-aware.
Yeah, I wasn't self-aware. There were things that we both messed up in the relationship, but I wasn't owning up to my part of it. And luckily, over the years, you know, God really exposed to me, hey, you didn't come talk to me. You really didn't carry this weight. You didn't do this well. And I had to come to the realization that, oh, man, it is give and take in a relationship. It is 50-50 as much as I wanted to blame the other person. No, you weren't carrying your half of the load. And so now, you know, now things have changed, you know, where, you know, that person left. But I think that's such a, whenever King David in Psalms prays that prayer, like, God, look at me and show me who I am.
Powerful and like
scary, intimidating.
Brave to pray such a thing.
Yeah. But yet it's so necessary because if you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with God? So if you're denying something, how can I truthfully take that to prayer and to Christ and allow him to speak into it.
Yeah, that's true. How
He can't. Well, he can't speak into it yet. It's almost like going to AA. The very first step is you have to admit
you have a problem.
I'm an alcoholic. My name is Mike, and I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
You have to have that breakthrough moment.
And in order to be intimate with the Lord, truth is necessary. It's like that with any relationship. You have to live in truth for it to be an authentic, intimate relationship. And you can't have that with the Lord because you're just not seeing it.
Yeah, he's pure truth, and you're coming with some darkness in you.
Yeah.
You have to purge that. And he'll help you, especially if you pray the prayer and mean it. Lord, show me.
I know. I've prayed that, and it's, when he does show you, you're like, ooh, that's in me. That's not nice. I don't like that. Like, God, I don't even know that I could fix that. That's all you, and I feel like denial gets to the point where you either have this breaking point where life just kicks you in the butt and you just go, I can't be this way. Or you have a loving friend that you finally stop avoiding, and they give you a little friendship slap, like, dude, what are you doing?
Yep.
In a way that you can receive it, because if you have a good friend, they're going to know how you need to hear that and what tone you need to hear that in. But those two things are really the only way that I've seen people kind of come out of denial. Or obviously, if they get to the point where they've broken themselves and they're like, I'm sick of who I am, and they go to God, God shows you either through a scripture, or he brings friends, or he brings sermons, or somebody recommends a book or something. But it's hard to break it. It's hard to be self-aware, because that's the last thing you are in denial is self-aware, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so I mean, when you were in your relationships, why do you think you were in denial?
Well, like I said earlier, I don't want to feel pain. Nobody does. And when you open your eyes to what's really happening, it's very painful. Well, at least in my relationships, it was.
Yeah. So with Anthony's dad, you mentioned, I mean, there had to be multiple layers of denial with someone like that, right? I don't want to just all encompassing. He was an unhealthy person to be in a relationship with. So do you think maybe you were trying to justify being in the relationship with him? Were you in denial because you didn't?
Well, I was,
for Anthony's benefit. I
was unhealthy, so I chose an unhealthy person, and we were unhealthy together. I at some point got, I can't. This is way more than I bargained for. This is really unhealthy. I know I'm messed up, but this is really messed up. I saw denial in areas that the standard person would go, gosh, that's probably not a good habit. I mean, he was so addicted to video games. And you think that's fairly kind of neutral, oh, it's video games, what's the big deal? And that denial was the very first thing I said. Well, at least he's not out partying or drinking and driving. And it
could be worse.
Right. You're rationalizing. It could be worse. But when that addiction consumed him, and now it was, I couldn't spend any time with him because he was fixated on a game. Or I would say, hey, I'd love to have just some quiet time in our home tonight. And he would invite over 6, 7 guys to play video games. And then there would be beer bottles and chips. And I'm stuck cleaning after everyone's gone when I asked you, hey, I'd like some quiet space in my home tonight. Or would rather play video games than be intimate with me. That was the biggest slap. I think that's what actually was wow, this is sick. You're sick. You're a guy and you don't want to have sex and you would rather play a video game. And then, of course, you go through this whole thing what's wrong with me? All women do this. you know, especially if they're in an unhealthy relationship. I don't think all women do it when they're in a healthy relationship, but needless to say, that was kind of I was unhealthy as well. And I got to the point where I was seeing something which would have been neutral, like playing video games, become so obsessive that it consumed every area of his life. And even to this day, like there are times, well, I don't speak to him to this day, but the last real interaction my son had with him, he was skipping work to play video games. And he was getting fired and having to get a new job. Like, dude, you're sick. You need help.
Yeah.
How can something so basic consume you this deeply? And I think it's because it's an escape. It's an escape from reality. Like, people don't want to live in reality because, let's face it, like, life is tough.
Yeah, and people don't want to live in reality. They'll say things like, "Oh, it's not that bad."
Right.
You know, I can stop anytime. You know, and it's interesting too how you almost have two different categories of addiction. The ones that truly in moderation are totally fine. And the ones that in moderation, it's still not even okay. Like playing video games in moderation.
Well, that's not an addiction. Moderation is always like that common ground where most people can stay. Addiction is like, bam,
No, but what I'm saying is it's still the same. Like if you were to point to drugs, you can point to drugs and just the overarching statement, drugs are bad.
right.
But you can't make that statement about sports. If a guy wants to watch a football game with his buddies, that's a healthy thing for a guy to do with his friends.
Right.
And get some chicken wings and sit there and enjoy a few hours together. But that same thing, again, when he's choosing that constantly over his wife, all sorts of things, and it becomes an idol.
Yes.
That one thing, it's interesting how you have those two categories where, you know, video games. Yeah. I mean, I play video games on my phone, I think so many people do when they're bored, but then you have that other category where it's not even remotely okay, but yet they'll still use the same excuses. Oh, it's not that bad.
Right. Because they don't see it. They just don't see it. Like, hello, you're losing a job. How is this not so bad? Like, it's fascinating to me. And I do think I use the word seducing because it consumes you, like it takes you over. It lures you into a sense of like normalcy. Like this is good. I feel great doing this. I'm having so much fun. It's that pleasure connection. It's the dopamine hit that they get.
Yeah. And it's just kind of crazy. Like when you're doing those things like watching sports and playing video games, what is that line of discernment? Because there again, some guy time in the summer, playing video games, nothing wrong with that. But what is that line where it starts to become unhealthy, and how do you use discernment to begin to understand, okay, this is becoming more than it needs to be in my life?
That's a great question to unpack. And this is just a humble opinion, I could be wrong, but when you look at your life and you go, what do I want to accomplish and how do I want to get there? When something like watching sports, for instance, we'll use that example, becomes so time heavy that all the other things in your life begin to pale in comparison. When you cannot accomplish a basic goal, like let's say my goal is to work out or my goal is to eat well, but because I've watched this much sports, there's no time to go to the gym. Because I associate watching sports with chicken wings and beer, I don't eat healthy. There's that, how much time does this take in your life? And has it become your central theme? I think that's a good source of like discerning.
Yeah, it's again, this is tricky because even people around you will be in denial. And what's crazy these days is society encourages denial, right? Your truth.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
That statement is very much a denial statement. When if I was watching too many football games, having a bunch of beers, the buddies that I'm there with, they're going to sit there and go, "You don't have a problem. We're all here," because half of it is they're having a good time.
Right.
They don't want to lose you.
Right. Well, there's always an enabler when there's an addict. There's always somebody that comes alongside and goes, "You're good. We got this. This is fine." And then when you fail to do what needs to be done, the enabler fixes it. And so that person stays
Or hides it.
Yeah, hides it, fixes it, denies with you so that you can continue to not feel the consequences of what you've done. Yeah. The enabler is just as much of an addict as the addict themselves. It doesn't seem like that would be the case, but there is a payoff for the enabler. They get to be the hero. They get to fix. They get to create the illusion that the person that they're trying to enable is all that they've pictured in their own head. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
my husband's not, and my husband's great. My husband does this and that, or my son is this and that, and that's the fantasy that you've created that you're trying to enable.
And the blaming of others comes into the equation at that point.
Oh, denial, yeah.
Yeah, the blaming of others rather
It's
than
projecting.
owning it. Yeah,
It's not my fault. It's your fault I do this.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's super dangerous and very toxic. I mean, denial itself is toxic, but when you start to really push the responsibility of your own choices onto somebody else because you can't cope, that's so detrimental to a relationship, to a friendship, to any kind of working relationship.
Push people away.
Yeah.
It'll absolutely, if I get blamed for a bunch of stuff just because I'm around you and you don't want to be honest with yourself about what you're doing,
Right.
I don't want to be around you.
Right.
You're taking down my character. I'm not going to enjoy my time with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a mess. So projection. Yeah. Projection's a great word.
So we've broken it down to like minimizing, projecting, which is blaming others, rationalization, creating excuses for why you do what you do. Those are kind of those categories that denial can produce.
Sure.
And there's no you're not walking in truth.
No, that's what makes it so difficult. Again, it's very seducing. I think you mentioned that word. It's very seducing because it makes me comfortable. In so much of society nowadays, we run away from being uncomfortable.
And that's where all the growth happens. That's where all the growth happens.
I think that's why so many people have anxiety. So many people are struggling. Life used to be so much harder. 100 years ago, life was so much harder than it is now.
Yeah.
But so many people are stressed out and this, that, and the other. And I'm sure some of it's tied to diet and this, that, and the other. But there has to be some level of people are not being honest with themselves and they're not voluntarily exposing themselves to the things that make them uncomfortable and being honest with themselves and trying to persevere through that.
Well, I think you make a valid point. Things were very hard 100 years ago, and we've produced a society, particularly in, a first world country, where we've eliminated any opportunity to even be uncomfortable. Like, everything is done for us. Everything is instant gratification. We are so conditioned by that we almost don't have any coping skills for something different, because it's not just I was raised this way, or the entire society is seeking comfort all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. So it's hard to pull yourself out of that when you don't really know, how do I do something uncomfortable?
And they're making they're taking something, a medication, a drug,
Yeah.
to make them feel like everything's okay. You're not supposed to be happy all the time.
No, that's totally a delusion. I did a report on happiness for one of my devotions, and it was really interesting because you know how we always see people smile when you take a
Yeah.
picture? Like, you ever look at old pictures?
Yeah.
Nobody's smiling. And if you were smiling in a picture, you were thought to be nuts. Like, why are you smiling? And it wasn't until like really, and I don't know how historically accurate it is when smiles started to become more popular in pictures, but the smiley face in the 1960s that was very common on the shirts really started to shift the culture to this uber happy, everything's okay. And people don't realize that it's okay not to be happy. I'm not saying you should be dwelling in pain and pity and sorrow and self, deprecation, but like being happy all the time is very unrealistic. And
It kills discernment.
yes,
It
does.
kills that discernment to go, something's not right.
Right,
Lord, what's going on here within me?
right.
You never circle back to the denial itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, even just last night, we had family dinner. The whole family came over, and we pulled out Dad's photos. He was in middle school. What was it, 1942, I think it was.
47?
Maybe.
Yeah, because he was born in 32, so he wouldn't have been in middle school at 10. But 1947.
And none of the kids in there were smiling. It was a class photo of 30, 35 people, maybe.
Yeah.
Nobody smiling.
Not like
Everybody
big
had
smiles.
suits.
Like,
no.
kind of like a moderate, like,
Maybe
here
a
I am.
grin. Yeah.
Grin. And they were all wearing suits.
Suits and ties, standing in front of the American flag, or
Yes.
seated in front of the American flag. But it's totally different. Totally different than what we have now,
Yes.
as far as look and feel.
It's a different world from when
Yeah.
he grew up. And it's kind of sad to me. Like, I know we have some really great advancements in technology and medicine and even self-awareness that they didn't have in the 40s, but we're whacked, man. We're going to the grocery store in like our pajamas and nobody cares. I mean, these kids are in suits. Their parents were like, "No, you're going to take that class picture in a suit. You're going to look nice." Now you have a parent going, "Oh, honey, you just be you. You want blue hair and a nose ring and, you want to wear booty shorts to school? Go for it." Like, that's self-expression. I'm like, how do we get here? How do
Yeah.
we get here? Denial.
And what happens when we stay in denial too long?
Oh my gosh.
You don't heal from things. I mean,
Well,
my
yeah.
goodness, like with all your past, with the sexual abuse and so on and so forth. How long did you avoid the word healing in that process? How many years?
3 decades. Yeah, I know you look shocked.
No, no, because I absolutely think that is very real for a lot of people.
Yeah. And the reality is, if we get down to how could it be 3 decades? Part of it was the minimizing. It's not that bad. I'm okay. I mean, how many times have you said, "I'm fine"? Well, I don't know if you've said it in that tone, but that's the girl tone. "I'm fine. I'm okay." Or it wasn't a big deal. It's, why would I bring it up now? After all these years, why would I bring it up now? And the reality of, if I open this box, can I endure the pain that lies ahead for me? And as an unsaved person, there would be no way I could have done what I did without Jesus. So number one, I knew I couldn't open that box. I didn't know why. I didn't know the Jesus connection back then because I was seriously a heathen. But looking back, I'm glad I didn't open that box and try to get healing without God. And then when I did actually get healed, it was still just as painful as I had imagined. And
When it was such a process for years. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, I absolutely believe God can change something in an instant.
yes,
But a lot of times he asks you to put in the work. So, yours was a process that you had to go over years and years. You had multiple classes, a mentor that you worked with for a while that finally got to that point where she was overwhelmed and said, I can't help you.
No.
You need to go to someone that deals with this kind of thing. So, I mean, yeah, you buried it for 30 years, but it took a lot of work to get that unearthed.
and then once I started to open that box and I stopped standing in denial, now it's like I can't. I have little tolerance for denial in my own life and in the lives of people I love. My desperate hope is to, when I see a friend who's in denial, is to lovingly be like, no, this is not right. And I'll tell you why it's not. Let me help you. Let me help you. Because I don't want anyone to waste 3 decades of their life in denial. I was so self-destructive in those years that I don't want to see anyone go through that.
So how were you self-destructive? What were some of the ways that denial impacted your life?
Oh, gosh. In every way possible. When I was a little kid, I was anorexic. I mean, talk about literally looking in the mirror, wasting away and seeing someone fat.
So what's the connection there? Because was that the connection? Was it a control thing? What was
Yes.
unpack that.
After being sexually abused and not having any control over my own body, people did what they wanted with me. And I didn't know this I was 8, but that, as a healed woman looking back at my younger self, that's what it was. It was, I control my body. And people were teasing me too, relentlessly, that I was fat. And I look back at pictures and I really wasn't fat. Kids were just mean.
Sure.
But I associated with oh yeah, I'll show all them. And I didn't have any real control over what people did to me. So the controlling how my body looked and what I put in my body, it was an act of defiance to everything that had happened to me. And I couldn't see that I was literally wasting away. And they call that body dysmorphia. It is a real thing that happens in your brain where you're in such denial that your brain starts to convince you of your lie. It's a very scary thing. But I was skin and bones. I have a few pictures from childhood where I was in that phase of anorexia and I was really skinny. And I remember looking in the mirror and not seeing that skinny figure. I saw a very chubby little girl and I was going to waste away.
You said this was at 8 years old?
Yes.
See, I thank you, Hollywood. I would picture anorexia to be something that people struggle with a little bit later in life as they enter teenage years.
Oh, and I'm sure that happens too.
Yeah, I'm sure it does too, but I wouldn't think that early in life. That's that's wrong on my part.
No.
I'm just speaking, processing out loud that I wouldn't have thought.
Mine is on the heels of trauma. Some
Sure.
other kids may have not had trauma, and anorexia could have been a result of cultural conditioning. I heard Jordan Peterson the other day mention cultural phenomenon of dysfunction, where there are phases that you can look to in the timeline of at least American history, where there's a mass hysteria of something, and anorexia actually was one of those things, just like gender dysphoria is now, that it's sweeping an entire culture, not just, hey, I feel this way, but an entire society is supporting that. And so it could have been for the older teenager looking at, supermodels that were really, really skinny and going, I don't measure up.
Sure.
I mean, now we have big butts, gray hair, thank God for Kim Kardashian's backside, because there's no more anorexia in the public eye at this point, where people are so skinny that you're trying to hit that ideal. Now you have these voluptuous women like a J-Lo and like a Kim Kardashian, and people are like, oh, I need to go to the gym and work my glutes. It's like such a different phenomenon than it was back in the 80s when you had models like Kate Moss and, people that were just super skinny. So it's one or the other. I think I hit it at 8 because it was a trauma response compared to a social phenomenon.
So in all of that, what snaps you out of it? Is there...
Well, I can't, for the anorexia, I was so young, like I was living under my parents' roof. They were force feeding me. So it's hard to say. I still, to this day, am working through food issues. Like, I don't know that it's embarrassing to say. I wish I could tell the audience that I have a great relationship with food. I don't, but I'm so much more healed than I ever was in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, truth and coming face to face with your denial, it's going to be painful.
Always.
It's going to be very, very painful to see yourself for what you are. At the same time, if you choose to walk through that door, it can be, if you put in the work, very freeing.
Oh, I mean, the truth will set you free is what the Lord says.
Yeah.
We don't even realize we're in a prison of our own denial. We're in a prison of our own false reality that we've created. I mean, if you would have asked Anthony's dad if he thought he was imprisoned by his addiction, he would laugh you to shame.
And I think there is a level of comfort for me, believe it or not. It's almost like when you come to terms with your own denial, it's very freeing. Just to come to terms, forget the healing part of it. That's a whole different level of freedom. But just owning up to what you've done wrong, where you're not running around making excuses all the time and this, that, and the other, just owning up to it is a sense of freedom. Then the healing from it is a whole different ballgame of freedom.
I can tell you why I think that's a sense of freedom. Is because when sin is hidden, the enemy has an opportunity to speak death over you, and pretty much condemnation comes in and says, well, you're a horrible person. Look what you've done. Like, when you take some darkness and you put it out in the light, there's no defense for that for Satan, because now you've owned it. It's there. I know sure. I've done bad things. Now what? Yeah. Now I have to bring it to Jesus. Like, there's no more condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who walk after the Spirit and not after the flesh, the scripture. And I think we don't always say that scripture in whole, but it's when you walk after the Spirit. And walking after the Spirit is walking after truth, because the Spirit is truth.
Sure.
So the enemy really doesn't have any more play.
The shame loses its value.
Yeah. That's why you feel so free, even just owning it.
Yeah.
Because it's not hidden anymore.
And then the work begins, right? Then the healing work can begin. And that's what God is so good at. You know, when you show up with that attitude of just going, I know I'm broken. Will you please fix me?
Yeah.
And you put in the effort. It's just like going to the gym. You put in the effort, you get on the treadmill, you'll see the results. And the same thing happens with God. If you put on those spiritual muscles and you go to him and say, show me where I'm broken, and then let's work together. And I mean, think of if your son came to you and said, Mom, I don't handle this part of my life very well. Would you help me?
I'd be thrilled to do it.
Yeah, because he's your kid.
Yeah.
And you want him to see the rewards of it. You want his wife to see the rewards of it. You want to experience the rewards of it. The ripple effects of getting that healing is incredible.
It is. It is. It's like throwing a stone into a lake and then seeing this outpouring of a ripple effect that everything gets touched. When one person heals in a dynamic of relationship, man, it's a trickle down effect. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
And I even know what's interesting too is I even know people. There's a guy that I work with that his form of denial was related to health. He didn't want to deal with, if this is happening to me and this is what potentially it could be, that's a lot. I'm just going to ignore the symptoms.
So dangerous.
It was very dangerous. And he wound up having stage 4 cancer. The symptoms were there and he was in denial, almost just going, and I can relate to that one myself because I can tough things out. Mm-hmm. I have a tendency to do that. I tore my rotator cuff and I was just like, I don't want the surgery. I don't want that. I'm just going to do the exercises and tough it out for the next 18 months while it heals.
Right.
And there's a time and a place for that. But at the same time, you know, there's going to be those times where you can be just in denial with your own health even.
Well, it's like the diabetic that goes, but I want the piece of cake.
Sure.
I want the pleasure of the cake. I don't care that I might lose a toe or I might lose, a foot. It's the addict that goes, but I like to smoke.
Sure.
Well, yeah, most people like what they're doing, of course.
Yeah.
Regardless of your lungs getting black and you can't breathe and you're hawking up loogies. Yeah, but, the health thing is, and I don't want to stereotype, please forgive me, but in my experience, I see more men denying their health issues than women. And I don't know if that's some sort of like, maybe men feel like it's not as, I'm not being as strong if I say I don't feel good. Like women have far more permission to say, I don't feel good than a man. Like somehow you're not manly if you go to the doctor. Is that my perception or does that have some basis of reality in society?
I'd have to think about that. I don't know. My gut reaction is probably in some instances, yes, and in some instances, no. In my own family, my father is very prone to go to the doctor and my mother refuses to go to a doctor. So
okay.
I really have to think about that. And I don't even know that I have the expertise to make a blanket statement like that. But
do you ever feel like if I don't want to go to the doctor because somebody might think I'm being a wimp?
No, to me, it's not a wimp. I don't want to deal with all the doctor visit. Like when I tore my rotator cuff, that's not like going to the doctor and you're going to have one visit. That's a whole series. And I'm like, it's going to go on for 18 months. Whereas if I'm not feeling well, like if I'm having stomach issues, I'll be the very first to sit there and go to urgent care and get something and get that taken care of. So to me, and I'm not even saying I'm right in these things. This is just how I process this. I sit there and I go, what is the reward? I know what a torn rotator cuff is. It's not cancer. I know doctors are going to want me to have surgery and they're going to want, there's 12 weeks of recovery time for rotator cuff surgery.
But you had 18 months of recovery even outside of surgery just because you had to do all the like exercises and you had to go easy. So you had that time passed you by either way. Yeah,
it did. But for me, surgery is almost a last ditch effort. And again, a rotator cuff's not a life threatening anything. If I felt like I was having symptoms that were some form of cancer or something, yeah, I'm going to be in the doctor as quickly as possible. So for me, it all just depends. I'm probably right in the middle between my mom and my dad, where, yeah, my dad, if he feels anything wrong, might as well just go in and get it checked, and thank goodness. I mean,
Yeah, he's caught things very early on because of that mentality.
yeah, he absolutely has. He absolutely has. But, yeah, very grateful for that. But it's, when dealing with denial, you've experienced so much of it just because of all the trauma and so on and so forth.
Life.
Yeah. What are the signs that you see in someone that gives you the cue, okay, I think this person is ready to face this and is ready to try and heal? Are there questions? Because I know I've been in the room when you have spoken to two different people that have had sexual abuse in their past.
Yeah.
And you could very easily tell that neither one of them were ready.
Right.
And it was scary to them, and they were not going to put in the work. And it was clear to see that, even though in the back of my mind, I wanted nothing more for them. And to this day, I still want nothing more than that. So what are the things that you start to notice in a person to go, hey, this is a legitimate cry for help. This person's ready to now do the tough thing, face that denial, and get healthy?
They stop avoiding, like someone that will entertain a longer conversation about, at least it starts off with, hey, this has been my experience with sexual abuse, and they'll listen, compared to someone who's not ready, almost wants to avoid that conversation altogether because they are assuming you may see something in them, or if they've told me, hey, I've had this in my life, they might avoid talking about it because they just don't want to. And when they get to the point where they are like a little bit more open to have dialogue about it, and they ask some questions like, well, how long did it take you to finally say something? Or did you ever feel like people weren't going to like you because you had this happen to you? Or just some basic questions. When you start to see people move in that direction where they're more inquisitive and they're not avoiding the darkness as much, you can see some readiness in that. I've also noticed when people go through something and you've warned them and you're like, hey, this is bad news, and then they don't talk to you or avoid you, and then they feel the brunt of their own choices and the consequence, they're far more humble to like, oh, wow, I should have listened. And then they'll start having some more open dialogue. So I always think it comes down to people talking through and externally processing. Even if you're more of an internal processor, you're going to want that help and you're willing to externally process. So I would believe in my heart that when you see people move in that direction, they're a lot more ready to deal with denial than they ever were before.
And also hitting you can't say enough about hitting rock bottom.
There is something about that.
There is absolutely something about hitting rock bottom.
And I almost say thank you, Jesus, for rock bottoms.
Sure.
Really. And everyone has a different depth. Like some people have to hit very deep before they'll change. Those stubborn people, they have to hit real hard. But if they didn't hit it, where would they be? Like God gives us that. God gives us the breakdowns.
Yeah, and
the breakthroughs.
We have a ministry at Calvary Fort Lauderdale called Calvary House. They have a program there for men and women. It's a residential program, and it's basically, it works best when people have hit rock bottom, and it's a place when you suffer from addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, doesn't matter. They basically put you up for free in housing, and they fill your entire week from Sunday at 12:01 to Saturday at 11:59. every minute of your day is accounted for doing something. Could be working out, could be
Working at the church.
actually working your, we'll call it a 9 to 5 job for the church, which could be landscaping, could be custodial work, could be
That's
working.
how it's free, by the way.
Yep.
If you're wondering,
yeah,
they're working for their housing.
Yeah. And you have to go to church services. You have to do Bible study. They will take you to Walmart. I don't know if I mentioned it, but they have workouts every morning. So they literally account for every minute of every day. And it's so sad because most people still fail. That's how difficult it is. People get
They have
worn
a good
out.
success rate, though. I don't think most people that go
No, when I volunteered there, you definitely saw the majority of people fail. But it's a higher success rate
for those that
than-
succeed.
I don't know what that means, but it's a higher success rate than if you just go to rehab. So by injecting Jesus into the process, number one, and number two, accounting for every minute, because the idle hands are the devil's work. They take that out of the equation. They take those idle hands and they insert Jesus into the process.
And a true addict wants, how do I want to say this? Like consistency. That's what they're like. An addict is very, very regimented. And that's part of the addiction too. So when you get yourself into a healthy regiment of devotionals at this time, working out at this time, like they're training the addict to, when they leave, have these consistent habits, because your habits form pretty much your character over time. And they're taking something that's very common to an addict, which is being regimented and wanting pattern, except they want a bad pattern, and replacing it with a good pattern. And so I could see that those that actually complete the program that are successful years down the road, that meaning they are sober still, it's because of those consistent patterns that they're being taught, which I think is beautiful, that there's this no idle time.
Yeah, and what's the hardest part of all of this, there's also another, so we have a residential program called Calvary House, but we also do the program Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery for a long time, especially when I first started working at Calvary Fort Lauderdale, was headed up by an individual that was addicted to drugs and got out of that addiction, got saved, went through Calvary House, did all sorts of things, and starts running Celebrate Recovery for many, many years, and then fell right back into the denial and got right back into drugs and ended up losing his life.
Very sad.
But it's amazing how denial is one of those habits that can easily sneak its way back into your life. You have to stay on top of it all the time.
And have people in your life that speak truth to you.
Yeah, the accountability partner, we mentioned that on this show so many times. You can't say enough about it. It can be hard to find those.
Oh, yeah.
It can be hard to find the person that has the right balance. And it's interesting because each person needs different things. Like for me, don't beat around the bush. Just tell me what you see. But there are other people that you need more empathy. You need more gentleness. Tender. Yes. Mm-hmm. So not only is it just finding someone that's willing to be an accountability partner.
That you trust, that is walking a life that is faithful.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's also, does this person and the way they speak truth into me, does it fit me as a personality? So it makes it very difficult. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to get out of a season of denial, I think an accountability, I don't know how you do it without an accountability partner. I don't know if it's even possible, to be honest. I'd have to think about that because God can do, he can do the impossible. So I'm sure there's instances out there where you can do it without, but my goodness, it also helps you to not fall back into the pattern. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a necessary, it's a blessing when you can find that person. And it really does help your success rate. Like I don't surround, but I don't choose to surround myself with people that tell me what I want to hear. Like if I start hanging out with someone and they're always my cheerleader, which is lovely, don't get me wrong, and they never say anything remotely discerning about, I mean, because I make big mistakes at times. I'm like, you better tell me if I'm making a mistake. Like I need friends that will not co-sign my nonsense. And there are people who surround themselves with those kinds of people. Like I think we talked often in our own private time when we were watching something with Elon Musk that he can't find people who, don't want to.
That's the hardest part
Brown
of being,
nose.
the hardest part of being Elon Musk is not surrounding yourself with yes men.
Right.
It's hard.
And it's important in our daily life is to find friends that are not, they're for you, but they're not going to let you do something that's detrimental because they love you. And I love the scripture, faithful are the wounds of a friend.
Yeah.
Like that's a faithful thing that your friend is willing to tell you hard things. That's a real friend. I love you enough to not co-sign. Like I had this more of an acquaintance than a good friend, but I really, really liked her a lot. And she was part of a larger social circle that I was in. And she had gotten quickly engaged. And everyone was like, oh, wow, okay. And she had been single a very, very long time. And so it's joyful when you're in a singles community for somebody to get, into a relationship and they seem happy. And I was seeing like all these red flags and everybody was like, oh, he's great. He's wonderful. And I'm like, what? This is what? And I tried a few times to kind of say, hey, what do you think about this? More in question form. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed that? But she had so many friends around her that were just like super happy that she wasn't single anymore. Like it was a disease or something, just come on with this singleness. Anyway, she invited me to her wedding. And I was like, oh no. I can't go to this. This is a disaster. She cannot marry this man. And God help me, like 2 weeks before, maybe less than 2 weeks. It's probably like a week before the wedding. I called her up and I was just like, oh God, I don't want to do this. Please don't make me do this. I don't want to do this. But I called her up and I was like, I love you so much and I want what's best for you. And I don't know if anyone in your life is going to tell you this. And I am truly willing to sacrifice this friendship for the sake of your betterment. But this is a mistake. I'm sorry. Somebody has to tell you. Nobody is telling you. Please don't do this. I don't want to go to your wedding and pretend. I'm sorry. I'm not going to come. And she was just like, she was a little shocked. I love her to death. She didn't hang up the phone and just go, screw you, lady.
Sure.
She could have. I mean, and I was willing to sacrifice the friendship for this because I really did not like this guy. And she went through a series of what I would call out of the list of denial rationalizations. And I just listened and I said, okay, well, I want nothing but the best for you and I love you. And I hung up. And that marriage lasted 4 months.
Wow.
And she called me back up and she's like, you're the only person that tried to warn me. I'm really sorry I didn't listen. And I like cried with her. I'm like, I'm sorry too. I wanted so much for you to just not do that. And she's like, man, you're brave, dude. You just totally, you just told me that. And you're willing not to be my friend anymore if I, dumped our friendship. And I'm just like really amazed by that. And I'm like, well, I just was trying to be obedient to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that marriage was 4 months.
Again, that discernment.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough line.
Yeah. And I want friends like that in my life.
Yeah.
I want people to go, hey, slow down, slow your roll. This isn't safe. Or, there's something better for you. But it's hard to find.
Yeah. So I think, in closing, just challenge the audience and ourselves. What area of your life are you not being honest with yourself?
that you can only do with Jesus. Like you can't just sit there and go, let me think about that on a, intellectual level. There has to be some spiritual like time with Jesus to meditate on that.
Yeah, I think there are people out there that truly know, that might be sick and tired of being sick and tired, that go, I'm my denial is avoiding. I need to stop avoiding, but I definitely think there are people out there that, meditating is spot on. Every single person meditating with Christ will benefit, the area of denial and just walking in truth. But I think that's just the challenge for the audience is if you're in denial, talk to God about it. How do I break away from this? Because that is freedom. Denial is shackles. Bondage, for sure. Totally. And we all struggle with it. None of us like to look and see the ugly in each of us. Right. So it's definitely an interesting challenge. But yeah, we've been talking about denial ourselves for the last few weeks. So we thought, hey, let's do an episode on this. We've seen it rear up, with some people that we knew and so on and so forth. And as we've just been talking, we said, hey, let's put some microphones in front of us. Let's do this as an episode. So, yeah, tough subject. Always is. Tough subject because you and I are hypocrites. We're sitting here making a show about denial, and yet I'm sure there's denial in our lives. No doubt. Yeah. You and I, let's hang up here and let's go meditate with Christ. I like that. Ourselves, so I can feel a little bit better about publishing this episode. Oh my goodness. Fair enough. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. My love. Thank you so much. Thank you, babe. Love your wisdom. All your perspective. Likewise. Definitely love getting the woman's perspective on everything that we talk about. It's always a blessing. Oh, thank you, babe. All right, guys, we will catch you again with another episode in a few weeks. Have a good one. Bye, guys.